Friends, if you want to watch the chilling and suspense-filled horror film Annabelle 2014 in English, then make sure to like this video. And if you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe, because here we bring you all the latest updates, interesting facts, reviews, and deep dives into the most thrilling movies out there. In today's video, we are going to talk in full detail about the terrifying film Annabelle, a movie that takes you into the origins of one of the most haunting dolls in cinematic history. This film is a key part of the Conjuring universe and offers a terrifying backstory that connects directly to some of the most iconic horror films of recent times. We'll be covering everything you need to know about this film. What is Annabelle about? What makes it such a talked-about horror film? Where can you watch it online? And on which OTT platforms or satellite TV channels is it currently available? Whether you're planning to stream it or catch a rerun on TV, we've got you covered with all the platform-related details. But that's not all. Today's video will also dive into the behind-the-scenes journey of this film. We'll talk about the film's pre-production process, how the concept was developed, the vision of the filmmakers, and how they worked to create the eerie atmosphere that defines this movie. We'll take a look at how the film was shot, where it was filmed, and how post-production techniques, like editing, color grading, and sound design, were used to enhance the suspense and horror. We'll also explore the music and sound department, because in a horror film, the sound is half the scare. The background score in Annabelle plays a huge role in building tension, and we'll talk about how it was crafted to match the disturbing tone of the movie. In addition, we'll examine the budget of the film and how it performed at the box office, how much it cost to make Annabelle, how much it earned worldwide, and how successful it was compared to other horror films in the same franchise. Then, of course, we'll get into the story itself. I'll give you a short but gripping review of the storyline, just enough to give you a sense of the film's mood, themes, and major events, without spoiling too much. We'll discuss how Annabelle connects to the larger Conjuring universe and what makes its narrative so effective in delivering scares. I'll share my thoughts on how well the story holds up, how the pacing and suspense keep you on edge, and how the fear builds slowly with every scene. And finally, we'll talk about the cast and performances, which actors starred in Annabelle, which characters they played, and how their performances contributed to the overall horror experience. We'll look at the lead roles as well as the supporting cast, and how well each of them brought their characters to life. You'll also learn about the real-life legends and paranormal stories that inspire the film, because sometimes the truth is even more terrifying than fiction. So friends, I highly recommend that you watch this video till the end. There's so much fascinating information packed into the story, and if you're a fan of horror films or just curious about how movies like this are made, you're in for a treat. Let's dive deep into the darkness and uncover all there is to know about Annabelle 2014. So sit tight, grab some popcorn if you're brave enough, and let's get started. Alright friends, buckle up, because we're about to take a deep, spine-tingling dive into the story of Annabelle 2014. And let me tell you, this movie is no ordinary haunted house ride. This is the kind of film that starts off like a peaceful lullaby and ends like a full-blown nightmare. The story unfolds in a beautifully deceptive way. It looks like a slow, simple tale at first, but it doesn't stay that way for long. Instead of tossing you straight into chaos, it builds suspense brick by brick, letting the tension simmer until it's ready to explode in your face. And when it does, it doesn't hold back. The movie opens in 1969, which is important. This is the calm before the storm. We meet our sweet, unsuspecting couple, John and Mia Form, living the kind of cozy suburban life that almost makes you feel safe. John is a doctor in training. Mia is pregnant with her first child, and everything looks picture perfect. It's almost like a setup from an old-fashioned love story. But then, of course, comes the gift. The doll, Annabelle, a strange, antique porcelain figure with dead eyes and a smile that should never have been carved into porcelain in the first place. John gives her to Mia as a thoughtful addition to her beloved doll collection. Bad idea, John. Really bad. Now here's where things start twisting. Right after the doll arrives, a horrifying event takes place, a brutal attack by members of a satanic cult in the middle of the night. Out of nowhere, this couple's peaceful life turns into a war zone. One of the cultists, a woman named Annabelle Higgins, dies while holding the doll, and in that moment, a dark force attaches itself to it. This is the film's first major turning point. It's not just about a haunted object, it's about what happens when something evil chooses a home and refuses to leave. From that point on, it's like the world around Mia and John begins to crack open, letting darkness leak in slowly, silently, relentlessly. Now, the movie doesn't go full chaos immediately. Instead, it creeps in, moment by moment. You get little signs, doors creaking open, the sewing machine running on its own, a rocking chair moving ever so slightly. The baby's crib seems to be a magnet for terror. Mia starts experiencing things that she can't explain. Is it stress? Is it her imagination? Is it the trauma of what happened during the home invasion? That's the genius of this part of a story. It keeps you guessing. You're seeing the world through Mia's eyes, and you're just as confused and terrified as she is. Then comes the move. After the attack, John and Mia try to escape the nightmare by moving into a new apartment complex, thinking a fresh start will solve everything. It's a logical move, right? New city, new home, new baby. What could go wrong? Well, unfortunately, evil doesn't care about your zip code. The doll mysteriously follows them, showing up in one of their moving boxes, even though John says he threw it away. And that's when things really kick into high gear. Because now the haunting is bolder, more violent, more direct. This stretch of the movie dives deep into the psychological horror zone. Mia is home alone with the baby most of the time, and the supernatural events become increasingly disturbing. She sees figures, hears voices, and has disturbing visions that blur the line between reality and hallucination. And the film masterfully plays with that uncertainty. It doesn't spell things out for you. It wants you to feel disoriented, like you're losing your grip along with the characters. There's a scene in a dark storage room that is pure nightmare fuel, just Mia, a dim flashlight, and something waiting in the shadows. Meanwhile, John, well-meaning but skeptical, tries to stay rational, trusting in doctors and priests instead of legends and curses. But even he begins to doubt what's real and what's not. The couple seeks help from Father Perez, a local priest who becomes one of the few characters to truly understand what they're dealing with. He explains that what's haunting them isn't a ghost, it's a demon. And not just any demon, it wants a soul. Not to scare, not to possess, but to take. That revelation shifts the tone entirely. It's no longer about spooky bumps in the night. Now it's about survival. And then comes one of the most intense sequences in the movie. The demon attempts to take the soul of the baby. It stages horrifying illusions, pushes Mia to the edge of sanity, and manipulates her into thinking the only way to save her child is to offer her own life. You can feel the stakes rise sharply here. The fear becomes personal. It's not just about a haunted doll anymore. It's about a mother's love and the unbearable idea of sacrificing everything to protect her child. The demon preys on that desperation. And that's what makes this narrative hit harder than your average horror flick. It's not just about jump scares, it's about emotional dread, about helplessness, about evil hiding in the spaces where you're supposed to feel safe. And all of this plays out in a structure that, while technically linear, feels rich and layered because of how deeply it invests in the character's emotional and psychological journey. The fear is built not just through loud noises or creepy imagery, but through vulnerability. It's horror grounded in reality. Also, let's not forget how effectively the story plays with silence. Long pauses, still shots, moments when nothing happens, but you know something is about to. Those scenes are sometimes more terrifying than the big moments because they let your imagination run wild. And when the horror finally strikes, it hits twice as hard. The final act of the film forces a moral choice that echoes back to the central theme. What is the value of a soul? Who deserves to be saved, and at what cost? It's not neat, it's not easy, and it leaves you shaken. Even when the film wraps up its story, that feeling of unease lingers. Because once you've met Annabelle, you don't just walk away. You remember her. Every time you see a doll. Every time the lights flicker. She's there. Watching. And that, my friends, is how Annabelle tells its story. Not just through plot twists or scares, but by getting under your skin and staying there. Let's go even deeper into the character world of Annabelle, 2014. Because this movie may be drenched in shadowy corners and ghostly whispers, but it's the characters, their reactions, their fears, their little victories and breakdowns that truly carry the emotional weight. Forget the jump scares for a second. Let's focus on the people who live in this nightmare and how they each unravel, transform, and reveal hidden layers of humanity as the darkness closes in around them. Starting again with Mia Form, the heart and soul of the story. Mia is not your typical horror protagonist. She isn't a scream queen, she isn't a horror trope, and she doesn't fall apart the second something strange happens. Instead, she's very real. When we first meet her, she's exactly what you'd imagine in a sweet 1960s American dream. Soft-spoken, polite, totally dedicated to building a warm, loving home for her new baby. There's an innocence to her that makes what follows all the more painful to watch. She's a young wife living in a quiet suburban neighborhood, nesting while her husband studies medicine. Her biggest concern in life? Arranging a cute nursery and making sure her doll collection looks just right. That version of Mia, smiling, glowing, hopeful, is the calm before the emotional storm. And then bam, everything changes. After the cult attack, Mia's world collapses. Suddenly, she's dealing with physical injury, emotional trauma, and a creeping sense that something very evil is now lurking just outside her reach. But here's where her character starts to shine. She doesn't spiral into helplessness. She starts to question. She notices things. She connects the dots, and what's fascinating is how quietly she begins to fight back. You can see it in her eyes as the fear shifts into resolve. She's not fearless, but she refuses to be paralyzed by fear. Mia's development is all about strength through suffering. She isn't a warrior by nature, she's made into one by experience. The deeper she's pulled into the supernatural chaos, the more determined she becomes. Every hallucination, every night spent awake cradling her child while a demonic force plays tricks on her senses, each one peels back another layer. She's tested constantly, physically and emotionally, and by the end, she's a completely different woman. She's a mother who would die for her child. She's not the same Mia who carefully arranged dolls on a shelf. She's someone who's been through a personal war and survived. Then we have John Form, her husband, who might not seem very complex at first, but that's where the film plays a clever trick. John is a classic rational man. He's studying to be a doctor, and like many logical thinkers in horror movies, he wants answers that make sense. When Mia tells him something weird is happening, doors moving, the doll appearing where it shouldn't, he comforts her but chalks it up to stress. After all, they were just attacked by a cult. He's trying to be supportive in the only way he knows how, by being calm and realistic. But that logical approach becomes his character flaw. What's so interesting is how long it takes John to really believe something supernatural is happening. He's not being cold, he's scared too, but he's also clinging to the idea that this can all be explained away. Because if it can't, then he's helpless to protect his wife and child, and that terrifies him. His journey is slower, subtler than Mia's. He doesn't scream or cry, or dramatically convert to mysticism. But gradually, he shifts. He listens more. He sees how much Mia is suffering. And by the time the demon targets their child, John is all in. He's no longer the man who just wants things to go back to normal. He's a man ready to stand beside his wife, even if he doesn't fully understand what they're facing. His character arc is about humility, learning that some things can't be fixed with science or reason. Now let's talk about Father Perez, who isn't on screen constantly, but leaves a strong impression every time he appears. Father Perez is more than just the priest character. He represents knowledge, but also spiritual vulnerability. He's calm, composed, and deeply empathetic. He listens when Mia explains what she's going through, and unlike John, he doesn't dismiss it. He treats it as something real. The beauty of Father Perez is that he doesn't overplay the man of faith archetype. He has doubts. He has fears. And when he tries to take the doll to the church to lock it away, the demon comes after him. That moment is huge because it shows that this evil doesn't respect tradition or sacred ground. Not even a man of God is safe. Father Perez's real contribution to the story is that he opens the door for the characters and the audience to accept that this isn't just a haunting. This is a war between good and evil, and there are rules we don't understand. He frames the conflict in spiritual terms without sounding preachy or dramatic. When he warns Mia that the demon wants a soul, you believe him. And so does she. That trust creates a powerful turning point in her journey. She no longer thinks she's crazy. She knows what's hunting her, and now she has to face it. And then there's Evelyn, the neighbor. Oh, Evelyn! What a layered surprise she turns out to be. At first glance, she's the cheerful, quirky woman down the hall. She brings Mia food, watches the baby, offers advice like a comforting aunt. But underneath that warmth is a tragic story. Evelyn is haunted too, not by demons, but by the memory of her daughter's suicide. Her grief gives her a kind of emotional X-ray vision. She sees Mia's pain, even when no one else does. Their friendship grows organically, and Evelyn becomes Mia's confidant and protector when John isn't around. But here's what makes Evelyn special. She's not just a helper. She's part of the emotional engine of the movie. Her backstory reveals itself slowly, and when we find out about her daughter, everything clicks. Evelyn is carrying guilt, and she's desperate for redemption. Her final act, offering herself to the demon instead of Mia, isn't just a plot twist. It's the natural conclusion of her arc. She finds peace in sacrifice, and in doing so, she gives Mia and her family a future. It's a beautiful, sad, and deeply human moment. And as strange as it sounds, even Annabelle the doll functions like a character. She never moves. She never talks. But her presence is loud. She sits there in that rocking chair like she's plotting something. And every time she appears in a new spot, or seems to trigger some new horror, you feel her impact on the characters around her. She's like a mirror reflecting their deepest fears. And that makes her terrifying. Not because she's a monster, but because she silently manipulates the people who come near her. So what do we get when we look at all these characters together? We get a group of people who grow, crack, struggle, and fight. They're layered. They make mistakes. They try to stay strong. And they're united by one thing, fear. Not just fear of the supernatural, but fear of loss, of pain, of the unknown. And it's in how they deal with that fear that we see who they really are. Annabelle isn't just a scary movie. It's a story about people who learn just how brave they can be when there's no other choice. Absolutely. Let's dive even deeper into the performances of Annabelle, 2014, because the film doesn't just rely on cheap thrills or spooky visuals. It depends heavily on how convincingly the actors make you believe the slow descent into demonic chaos. Without grounded, emotionally resonant performances, the scares would feel hollow. But what elevates Annabelle is how every actor, from lead to supporting, gives it their all, adding layers of humanity, vulnerability, and tension that keep your eyes glued to the screen, even when part of you wants to look away. Let's revisit Annabelle Wallis as Mia, because the more you think about her performance, the more you realize just how much heavy lifting she's doing. This isn't an ensemble horror where the fear is spread evenly across a group. This is Mia's story. We're with her in nearly every scene, watching her sanity slowly fray as an unseen, malevolent force wraps its icy fingers around her life. And Wallis plays this unraveling with stunning control. In the early scenes, she gives off a gentle, almost delicate energy, perfectly capturing the vibe of a young woman who's focused on homemaking, preparing for motherhood, and basking in the comfort of a quiet life. She plays Mia as someone full of warmth and good intentions, which makes her eventual unraveling all the more heartbreaking. But here's what makes Wallis's performance so impressive. She doesn't flip a switch and go from happy to hysterical. She builds it. You see the fear creep in, the confusion, the denial, then the dawning horror. There's a stretch in the middle of the film where her performance is basically a masterclass in silent dread. Those moments when she's alone, walking past that creepy doll, or when she hears something just a little too loud in the hallway. She doesn't scream at every sound. She doesn't panic instantly. Instead, she lets her body language and facial expressions do the work, tightening her posture, narrowing her eyes, holding her breath. She draws you into her experience by making every reaction feel authentic, which is no small feat in a genre where it's so easy to overact. Later, when the demon's attacks become more intense and targeted, Wallis lets Mia's fear evolve into desperation and protectiveness. This is especially powerful in scenes where her maternal instincts kick in, because this isn't just a woman being haunted. This is a mother trying to keep her baby alive. And when that protective instinct clashes with helplessness, Wallis delivers some of her most powerful emotional moments. Her cries are raw, her fear feels bone deep, and her strength comes through in quiet, determined resolve. She doesn't have a final girl screamathon. She has a mother's fight, a much more grounded and emotionally potent transformation. Now moving on to Ward Horton as John Form. At first glance, he seems like the straight-laced, supportive husband. And that's true, but Horton's performance adds more subtlety than the role might initially suggest. John isn't the hero of this story. He's not the one battling demons in every scene. But Horton gives him this understated emotional arc that mirrors the audience's journey. He starts off skeptical, maybe even a little dismissive. His belief system is rooted in logic and science, not superstition. He doesn't see the doll as a threat. He sees it as a symbol of Mia's trauma. Horton plays this with a softness that feels real. He's not harsh or cold. He's concerned, and trying to help in the only way he knows how. The strength of Horton's performance lies in the restraint. He doesn't try to match Wallis's emotional intensity, he counters it. And in doing so, he gives the audience someone to identify with when the supernatural stuff starts kicking in. He grounds the story in a relatable, what if this happened to my family reality? And slowly, as he sees more unexplainable things, his disbelief starts to crack. Horton doesn't overplay this shift, but you can feel it. The way he looks at Mia changes, the way he listens to her becomes more serious, and eventually, he becomes an active participant in the fight against the evil. It's a quiet but meaningful transition from observer to believer, and Horton handles it with grace and humility. Then there's Tony Amendola as Father Perez. This guy doesn't just show up and deliver exorcism lines. He brings weight to every word, every look, every prayer. Amendola has this commanding presence, and in a film filled with fear and uncertainty, he becomes the calm in the storm. There's something about the way he speaks, measured, compassionate, but never condescending, that makes him immediately trustworthy. He's not just a man of the cloth stereotype. He's a man who's seen things. You believe he's faced darkness before, and that he knows what he's talking about when he says that evil is real. Amendola also brings emotional depth to the role. He genuinely cares about Mia and John. He's not just helping because it's his job. He's helping because he believes it's the right thing to do. And when the demon comes for him, as he's trying to take the doll to the church, that moment is powerful. He's terrified, but he doesn't run. He tries to protect, to contain, to stand between the evil and the innocent. And when he later recounts his experience, Amendola delivers the lines not with dramatic flourish, but with a haunted calm that makes the stakes feel very real. And then we have the MVP of emotional resonance, Alfre Woodard as Evelyn. Woodard could have just coasted through the kind neighbor role, but no, she digs deep and turns Evelyn into a deeply layered character. From the first moment she steps on screen, she radiates warmth. She becomes an emotional lifeline for Mia, a presence that's comforting, maternal, and unafraid to believe her. Woodard's performance is gentle but never weak. And as Evelyn's own backstory is revealed, that she lost her daughter and has been living with guilt ever since, you suddenly realize the weight behind her every kind word, every reassuring smile. Woodard doesn't need big emotional outbursts to convey grief. It's in the way she holds Mia's hand. It's in her eyes when she talks about faith. Her final act of sacrifice could have felt contrived, but Woodard makes it feel inevitable. Like a woman who has been carrying a heavy burden and finally sees a chance to redeem herself. And when she does it, you don't feel shock, you feel a kind of tragic peace. That's the mark of a great performance. It doesn't just serve the story, it elevates it. And even though the doll itself isn't a traditional actor, Annabelle the character deserves a moment. The filmmakers treat her like a performer. She doesn't move, but she's directed like an actor. Every time she appears on screen, it's a performance. The lighting, the camera angle, the sound design, it all works together to make her presence feel like she's reacting, observing, planning. The stillness becomes menacing, and the actors respond to her like they're facing an actual entity. That interaction, the way Mia stares at her with dread, the way the camera lingers on her with reverence, is what turns the doll into a character rather than a prop. So when you step back and look at the entire cast, what you see is a collection of performances that work in harmony. No one's trying to outshine the other. They're all tuned into the same emotional frequency, grief, fear, confusion, love, and that's what makes Annabelle work. Let's really stretch out under the eerie spell of John R. Leonetti's direction in Annabelle, because if ever there was a director who knew how to make stillness feel like a scream waiting to happen, it's him. This isn't the kind of direction that's flashy or flamboyant. It's not filled with wild edits or over-the-top tricks. Instead, Leonetti opts for a slow, suffocating style that works like a quiet virus. You don't feel it creeping in until it's already inside your system. And that's the magic here. His horror isn't loud, it's lurking. From the first scene, Leonetti begins building a visual world that's meant to trick you. He lures you in with this golden, sun-drenched suburban dream. It's the early 1970s. There are baby clothes, sewing machines, smiling neighbors, and cozy kitchens. The world of Mia and John feels warm and wrapped in nostalgia. The color palette is soft. The camera moves are gentle and measured. It all feels like you've stepped into a commercial for peaceful domestic life. But don't get too comfortable, because Leonetti is setting you up for the fall. He's using that wholesome visual language so that when things start to go off kilter, your brain screams, asterisk, wait, this isn't supposed to happen here. Asterisk. And when the descent begins, Leonetti starts tightening the vise, ever so slightly. The camera starts lingering too long in corners. Shadows start getting darker. The shots get wider, but somehow they feel more claustrophobic. He masterfully controls your field of vision, letting you see just enough to get nervous, but never enough to feel safe. Take a scene where Mia walks through her apartment and the doll is just sitting in the corner. Nothing moves. No loud music. Just a slow pan. And yet your whole body is tense because Leonetti lets the silence do the talking. He doesn't force the scares, he invites them, like a whispered dare. That's one of the boldest parts of his direction, his restraint. He has the discipline not to rush the horror. He lets dread marinate. He gives the camera time to breathe, and in doing so, gives the audience time to squirm. The pacing is deliberate, and that slow burn approach does something really important. It makes you paranoid. You stop trusting the frame. You start expecting something terrible to happen at any moment, and that anticipation is more terrifying than any demon reveal could ever be. That's not just suspense, it's craft. And oh, the way he uses space. Leonetti has a deep understanding of the architecture of fear. Hallways in this film aren't just hallways, they're runways for anxiety. Doors don't just open, they invite the unknown. He makes ordinary objects, the crib, the elevator, the sewing machine, feel like traps waiting to spring. He transforms familiar household settings into stages for supernatural tension. And every time he lets the camera hold just a second longer than you expect, you start bracing for a scare. Sometimes it comes. Sometimes it doesn't. That unpredictability keeps your nerves raw. Then there's the doll. Now, this is where his direction truly shines, because Annabelle doesn't move. She doesn't speak. She just exists. So how do you make a silent, stationary object terrifying? That's where Leonetti's visual storytelling goes into overdrive. He frames the doll with reverence, like it's a cursed idol. Low angles make her look dominant. Static shots give her weight. And whenever she's in the room, the energy changes. Leonetti builds her presence through atmosphere, flickering lights, shifting shadows, sudden silence. He doesn't need her to do anything. He suggests that she might, and that suggestion is more powerful than 100 jump scares. But he doesn't just stop at creepy visuals. Leonetti is incredibly clever with how he shapes sound to match his imagery. It's not always about loud musical stings or shrieking violins. Often, it's the absence of sound that creates the most tension. A quiet room, a soft shuffle, the hum of a baby monitor. He turns ambient noise into emotional cues. There are moments in the film where you'll realize your own breathing has gone quiet just to match the scene. That's direction working at the subconscious level. It's manipulation, and it's brilliant. Now, let's talk about the emotional framing of the story. Because Leonetti doesn't just deliver horror, he builds a very human core into the film. At its heart, Annabelle is about motherhood, trauma, faith, and sacrifice. And Leonetti never lets those themes get swallowed by the supernatural plot. He brings a kind of emotional elegance to the way he directs Mia's journey. He ensures that we never see her as a victim without agency. Instead, we see her as someone unraveling but fighting. And every time he puts the camera on her face, full of fear, confusion, or steely resolve, it's clear that he's directing not just a character, but a portrait of human endurance under attack. And let's not forget his sense of spiritual tension. Leonetti leans into the film's religious elements, not just as plot devices, but as aesthetic language. When Father Perez enters the story, there's a tonal shift. Churches are filmed like sanctuaries, but also like looming cathedrals of judgment. Crosses are ever present, but rarely offer safety. Religious imagery becomes part of the threat, uncertain, ambiguous, and unsettling. Leonetti walks a fine line between faith and fear, and he directs the film in a way that keeps both in constant tension. There are also these stylistic flourishes that show his eye for detail, like how mirrors are used, not for jump scares but for dread, or how the color palette slowly drains over time, or how the editing rhythm subtly quickens as the demonic threat tightens its grip. Every small shift is a signal, a build-up, a breadcrumb leading us closer to something horrible. And yet, even in those heightened moments, Leonetti never lets the film slip into chaos. He maintains control. He choreographs fear with the precision of someone who understands that horror is as much about rhythm as it is about raw shock. So while the script may give you the bones of a story, it's Leonetti's direction that gives Annabelle its blood, its skin, its breath. He turns a haunted doll movie into an experience that crawls under your skin, settles in your spine, and waits, patiently, to strike. He directs with a confidence that says, I don't have to rush. I know you're scared. And by the time the credits roll, you realize he was right. You were scared. From the very beginning. You just didn't know it yet. Let's dive even deeper into the captivating world of Annabelle's cinematography, because this film's visual language does so much more than just show you what's happening. It immerses you inside the terror itself. Cinematographer Michael Burgess crafts every frame with precision, using camera angles, lighting, and composition as if they were instruments in a symphony designed to play on your nerves. The result is a film that visually traps you in a world where nothing is quite as safe as it seems, and every shadow hides a secret. Starting with lighting, Burgess turns what could be simple indoor scenes into dynamic, mood-heavy spaces. In the beginning, when Mia and John's apartment feels like a cozy nest, the lighting is soft, warm, and inviting. Natural sunlight filters gently through lace curtains, giving the rooms a comforting glow. But as the story unfolds and the sinister forces start tightening their grip, the lighting changes dramatically, becoming colder, harsher, and more fragmented. It's almost like the light itself is fighting to survive, flickering like a candle struggling against a draft. Sometimes the scenes are lit by dim lamps or candles, which cast long, wavering shadows that make every corner look like a hiding spot for something wicked. This shifting light creates a kind of breathing space, where fear inhales slowly and then suddenly exhales, making you tense without even realizing it. Now, angles are a huge part of how this fear gets communicated. Burgess uses low-angle shots to make the doll and other supernatural presences feel larger than life, looming over the characters and, by extension, the audience. You get this unnerving feeling that something in the room is watching you, dominating the space. Then, contrastingly, there are those tight close-ups on Mia or John's face during moments of fear and uncertainty. The camera doesn't shy away from getting intimate with their expressions, capturing every twitch, every bead of sweat, every flicker of panic in their eyes. These close-ups put you right there with the characters, making you experience their dread firsthand. But just as you're leaning in, the camera will pull back to wide shots that make the apartment feel cavernous and isolating, emphasizing how small and vulnerable the characters really are in the face of evil. This dynamic between close intimacy and wide isolation keeps you off balance, mirroring the emotional roller coaster the characters are riding. One of the most brilliant visual strategies Burgess employs is the framing of Annabelle herself. The doll is almost always placed dead center in the shot, like a sinister queen sitting on her throne. She rarely moves, but the way she's filmed gives her a menacing stillness that's deeply unsettling. Burgess uses reflections, shadows, and partially obscured views to add layers of mystery. Sometimes you see the doll through a cracked mirror or behind a curtain, which makes you feel like you're catching glimpses of something forbidden. This layering of images creates depth that makes the doll feel like a living presence, lurking just out of reach. The cracked porcelain face catches the light in ways that highlight her damaged, almost decaying nature, suggesting that evil has left a physical scar, something that's not just spiritual but tangible. The pacing of the camera movements also deserves attention. Burgess often opts for slow, deliberate tracking shots that follow characters through dimly lit corridors or cramped rooms. These shots are like a slow walk down a dark hallway where every creak and whisper is amplified in your mind. The camera's patience forces you to anticipate a scare, ratcheting up tension with every step. When the action peaks, the cinematography shifts, handheld shots become more common, adding jitter and instability that mirror the character's frantic fear. This careful modulation between steady calm and chaotic panic keeps the visual experience engaging and emotionally effective. Color palette is another subtle but powerful weapon in Burgess's arsenal. The muted earth tones and sepia hues evoke the 1970s era, but also create a washed-out, almost lifeless atmosphere that feels like hope is draining from the walls. This desaturation is punctuated by occasional pops of color, most notably deep reds that catch your eye and signal danger or blood. These visual cues work on a subconscious level, guiding your emotional responses without you even realizing it. The contrast between the subdued colors and sudden bursts of vividness keeps your senses on edge. Depth of field is used masterfully to control where your attention lands. Burgess blurs out background or foreground elements to force your focus on something critical, often a character's fearful expression, or a key object like the doll or a swinging door. This selective focus creates a visual tunnel that narrows your perspective, making you feel trapped and heightening suspense. It's like the cinematography is playing a game with your eyesight, daring you to look deeper while hiding what's lurking just beyond. Light and shadow dance an intricate ballet throughout the film. Burgess doesn't just use darkness to scare you, he uses light too. Sometimes the brightest, most well-lit areas feel just as threatening because they cast stark shadows or reveal unexpected reflections. This ambiguity between light and dark creates a world where safety is an illusion. One moment you might feel sheltered under a pool of light, the next you realize something terrible could be lurking right at the edge of your vision. This constant tension between what's seen and unseen keeps your mind racing. Visually, the cinematography draws a sharp contrast between the normal and the paranormal. Mundane scenes of Mia sewing or setting up baby things are filmed with warm, stable compositions that feel grounded and reassuring. But as soon as the supernatural presence steps in, the framing shifts, shots become skewed, angles grow more angular, and the lighting cools, making the familiar feel alien and threatening. This subtle but consistent visual signaling primes your nerves to expect the uncanny, heightening every jump scare and supernatural twist. The elevator scene is a standout sequence that showcases the cinematography's power to build claustrophobic tension. The confined space, the flickering overhead light, the tight framing on Mia's terrified face, it all combines to make you feel trapped right alongside her. The repetitive opening and closing of the elevator doors becomes a hypnotic rhythm, pulling you deeper into the terror of the moment. Burgess's camera work here is nothing short of masterful, turning a simple setting into a nerve-wracking ordeal. Overall, the cinematography in Annabelle doesn't just capture the story, it tells it. Every camera angle, every play of light and shadow, every carefully chosen color and focus choice serves the narrative by pulling you deeper into the world and the dread that inhabits it. The film's visuals are like a whisper in a dark room, subtle but impossible to ignore, and they invite you to look closer, feel more, and become part of the haunting experience. The camera doesn't just watch the horror unfold, it makes the horror watch you. Alright, let's really sink our teeth into the editing and pacing of Annabelle, because these elements are like the unsung heroes quietly steering your emotional roller coaster throughout the film. Editing isn't just about cutting scenes together, it's about controlling the heartbeat of the movie, and in Annabelle, that heartbeat pulses with tension, dread, and surprise in a rhythm that's carefully crafted to keep you hooked and uneasy at the same time. From the opening moments, the editing sets a tone of calm before the storm. Scenes flow smoothly, almost gently, moving you through the characters' lives without jarring interruptions. This seamlessness lulls you into a false sense of security, like the calm before a lightning strike. You're settling in, maybe even relaxing a bit, and then bam, the pace shifts, and the horror crashes in like a wave. The editors understand that to scare you properly, they have to earn your trust first, and that means pacing the story so you're emotionally invested before the chaos starts. One of the coolest things about the editing here is how it manipulates your anticipation. The film loves to stretch out quiet moments, holding on a lingering shot of an empty hallway or a character's tense expression, just long enough to make your skin crawl. This technique takes advantage of your natural tendency to start imagining what could happen next, to fill in the silence with your own fears. It's like the editors are whispering to your imagination, "Look closely, something's about to happen." And when it does, the cut is sudden and sharp, jolting you awake with a jump scare or unsettling image. During the horror sequences, the editing kicks into high gear. Quick cuts and fragmented visuals mimic the characters' frantic minds, their fear and confusion conveyed not just through their acting, but through how the story is pieced together visually. These rapid-fire edits create a sense of disorientation, making you feel just as lost and vulnerable as Mia and John. When the camera cuts between close-ups of their panicked faces and fleeting glimpses of the doll or supernatural occurrences, it feels like your senses are overloaded, and that's exactly the effect the film aims for, to overwhelm and unsettle you. The rhythm of Annabelle isn't just about speed, it's also about pauses. The editors strategically slow down the tempo during emotional or suspenseful scenes to give you a chance to breathe and connect with the characters. These slower moments deepen your empathy, making the scares hit harder because you actually care what happens to Mia and John. This push and pull between tension and release is the heart of the film's pacing, creating a roller coaster of emotions that feels natural and immersive. Transitions in the film are a masterclass in subtlety. Rather than flashy or jarring cuts, the film often uses dissolves, fades, or sound bridges that blur the line between scenes. For instance, a creaking door sound might carry over from one scene into another, or a flickering light in one shot dissolves into a similar flicker in the next. These editing choices keep you feeling like you're slipping between reality and nightmare, enhancing the film's eerie atmosphere without drawing attention to themselves. It's editing that quietly messes with your sense of time and place, making you question what's real and what's not. Sound and silence also play an integral role in the editing's pacing. There are scenes where the cuts slow to near stillness, stretching out long, quiet shots where the only sound might be the characters breathing or the faint rustle of fabric. In these moments, your own heartbeat feels loud, and the tension builds to an almost unbearable level. Then, without warning, the editing snaps you into a quick cut or a sudden scare, breaking the silence and releasing the tension in a burst of adrenaline. This ebb and flow of silence and sound, slow cuts and fast cuts, is like the film's own breathing, pulling you in and pushing you away. Another interesting facet of the editing is how it shifts perspectives to keep you guessing. The film often cuts rapidly between what the characters see and what might be lurking just outside their view. Quick flashes of darkened rooms, moving shadows, or the doll's unmoving gaze interspersed with close-ups of the characters' faces, making you feel like you're piecing together a puzzle from fragments. This fractured narrative rhythm contributes to a sense of paranoia, where nothing feels safe or stable, and the editing cleverly mirrors the characters' unraveling mental states. The pacing is also mindful of the genre's need for tension building. Horror thrives on anticipation, and the editors resist the temptation to throw scares at you nonstop. Instead, they allow scenes to simmer, layering unease so that by the time a scare hits, it's earned and impactful. This restraint makes the moments of terror feel fresh and sharp rather than exhausting or predictable. Sometimes, the pacing might feel like it's dragging during slower, dialogue-heavy scenes, but this isn't a flaw, it's a deliberate choice. These moments are the glue that holds the story together, providing context, developing relationships, and allowing the atmosphere to thicken. They give the film a steady rhythm, a kind of dark lullaby that you almost want to relax into, even as it keeps you alert and waiting for the next shock. In sum, the editing and pacing in Annabelle act as the invisible hand that guides your emotional experience. Whether it's through smooth transitions that pull you gently along, sudden cuts that jolt you awake, or lingering shots that make you squirm with anticipation, the film's rhythm is carefully tuned to keep you invested, terrified and breathless. It's a dance between calm and chaos, patience and urgency, silence and sound, a perfectly choreographed sequence that turns watching into a pulse-pounding, edge-of-your-seat adventure where every cut counts and every second builds toward the next heartbeat-skipping moment. The soundtrack and score of Annabelle are absolutely essential in crafting the film's chilling atmosphere, working behind the scenes like a master illusionist manipulating your emotions with sound. Composer Joseph Bashara doesn't just create music here, he builds an auditory landscape that drapes over every scene, wrapping you in a thick fog of unease and suspense. The way the score interacts with the story is anything but passive. It's an active force that heightens every moment, whether it's a quiet family interaction or a sudden, heart-stopping scare. It's the kind of score that sneaks up on you, embedding itself in your subconscious, so you feel on edge even during the calmer scenes. Right from the start, the soundtrack sets the tone with an unsettling minimalism. Instead of lush melodies or traditional orchestration, you get these sparse, eerie sounds, like distant drones, soft but ominous humming, and dissonant tones that seem to hang in the air. This minimalist approach is brilliant because it doesn't overwhelm the senses, but instead creates an atmosphere that's claustrophobic and tense, like the calm before a storm. The music feels almost like a living presence, lurking in the background, signaling that something malevolent is always nearby, even when nothing overtly scary is happening. What makes the score particularly effective is its use of recurring motifs, little musical phrases, or sounds that pop up repeatedly throughout the film. These motifs act like audio bookmarks, reminding you of the lurking evil associated with the Annabelle doll. They're subtle but unmistakable, and each time they play, your anticipation builds because you subconsciously know something bad is about to unfold. This repetition makes the music a storytelling device in itself, encoding the idea of dread and danger into your brain, so that just hearing those motifs sends a chill down your spine. One of the most striking features of a score is its dynamic use of silence. In Annabelle, silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's a tool that the filmmakers wield with precision. During key scenes, the music drops away entirely, leaving only natural sounds, footsteps echoing in an empty house, the faint creak of a door, or the subtle breathing of a frightened character. This strategic silence amplifies the tension because it forces you to focus intensely on the smallest noises and movements, making you hyper-aware of your surroundings in the theater or room where you're watching. The contrast between these quiet moments and the bursts of music creates a push-pull effect that keeps your nerves taut. The score also smartly complements the film's emotional beats. It's not all about scares. There are moments of vulnerability and human connection that the music underscores with more delicate, nuanced compositions. When Mia and John share tender or anxious moments, the music softens, sometimes with gentle piano notes or subtle strings, to deepen your emotional engagement. These softer touches prevent the soundtrack from becoming monotonous and help balance the film's tone, making the character's plight more relatable and the horror elements more impactful because you care about the people being terrorized. Bishara's approach to instrumentation is fascinating because he blends traditional orchestral sounds with more experimental, sometimes unsettling noises. You'll hear stretched-out violin notes that sound almost like a human wail, electronic pulses that vibrate under the surface, or sharp, discordant tones that cut through scenes like sudden jolts. This mixture creates a rich sonic texture that's unpredictable. One moment you're soothed by something familiar, and the next, you're rattled by a sound that feels alien and threatening. This unpredictability keeps you guessing, which is perfect for a horror film where uncertainty fuels fear. Another clever element of a soundtrack is how it layers sounds gradually. Often, a scene will begin with a single haunting note or a barely audible sound that slowly builds in intensity as the tension rises. This gradual layering mimics the film's narrative structure, where the story tightens its grip on the characters and the supernatural presence grows stronger. It's like the music is pulling you deeper into the nightmare, drawing you in step by step until you're fully immersed in the film's eerie world. Sound design works hand in hand with the score to create an immersive experience. Everyday sounds are heightened and mixed into the soundtrack with care. Things like the ticking of a clock, the rustle of clothing, or the distant rumble of thunder become part of the musical tapestry. These natural noises don't just fill the space, they interact with the music, sometimes blending smoothly, sometimes cutting sharply, which enhances the feeling that the supernatural is bleeding into the real world. This blending of diegetic sounds within the film's world, with the non-diegetic score is key to keeping you unsettled and on edge. Importantly, the music is never overbearing. It knows when to take a step back and let silence, dialogue, or sound effects carry the scene. This restraint shows a deep understanding of horror's psychological power. Sometimes what you don't hear is just as frightening as what you do. The gaps, the silences, The moments of stillness create space for your imagination to fill in the blanks, and that can be terrifying. Bishara's score doesn't scream for attention. It creeps in quietly, shaping your experience without ever overpowering the story. When the film reaches its most intense moments, the score becomes almost physical, vibrating through the speakers with deep, pulsating sounds that you can feel as much as hear. These sonic surges are carefully timed to jolt you, pulling you out of any sense of safety and into pure adrenaline-fueled fear. But just as quickly, the music pulls back again, leaving you suspended in silence and uncertainty, waiting for the next shock. This ebb and flow of sonic intensity mimics the roller coaster of emotions you experience as a viewer. In the end, the soundtrack and score of Annabelle do more than just accompany the film. They are a character in their own right. Like a dark whisper in the shadows, they guide your emotional journey, heighten your senses, and keep you wrapped in a cocoon of fear and suspense. The music's careful interplay of eerie sounds, recurring themes, strategic silences, and emotional nuances makes the horror feel immediate and personal. It's a brilliant example of how sound, when expertly crafted, can become as terrifying and unforgettable as any ghost or demon on screen. Annabelle is much more than just a haunted doll horror flick. It's a rich exploration of several deep, unsettling themes that quietly weave through the story and stick with you long after the credits roll. At its core, one of the film's most prominent themes is the corruption of innocence. The doll Annabelle, on the surface, looks like an ordinary, even adorable children's toy, something you might find sitting harmlessly on a shelf in a nursery. But this outward innocence is a chilling disguise for the dark, malevolent force it harbors inside. This clash between innocence and evil isn't just a scary visual, it's a powerful metaphor that echoes throughout the film. It taps into a fundamental human fear that evil can infiltrate and poison what we consider pure and safe. It's a reminder that danger can lurk beneath the most familiar and benign facades, which makes the horror feel eerily close to home. This idea of innocence lost ties deeply into another theme, vulnerability, especially within the sanctuary of home and family. The characters in Annabelle are striving to create a safe, loving environment, yet this fragile bubble is violently punctured by the malevolent force unleashed by the doll. The film highlights how quickly and easily a safe haven can be corrupted and turned against those who seek refuge within it. The terror isn't just supernatural, it's profoundly personal because it invades the characters' private lives and relationships. It speaks to the universal fear that the places and people we trust the most might not protect us from harm. This makes the supernatural elements feel more real and immediate because the fear extends beyond ghosts and demons. It's about real emotional vulnerability. Closely intertwined with vulnerability is the film's exploration of faith and spirituality. Annabelle doesn't shy away from portraying religious elements, but it does so with subtlety and respect, avoiding preachiness. The battle between good and evil is framed as a spiritual war, where faith becomes both a shield and a weapon. The presence of priests, holy water, crosses, and prayer serves as more than just set dressing. They symbolize the human attempt to grapple with and confront the dark forces that defy rational understanding. This theme adds a metaphysical layer to the horror, suggesting that the fight isn't just physical but spiritual, which raises the stakes and enriches the story. It also taps into a primal narrative many people are familiar with, the idea that light and darkness are eternally at odds, and that faith, hope, and belief are crucial in resisting evil. Curiosity, and the consequences of meddling with the unknown, is another classic but effectively handled theme in Annabelle. The characters' attempts to understand, control, or intervene in the supernatural events often lead to disastrous results. This cautionary message, warning against poking into dark forces without understanding, is a staple of horror, but here it's woven carefully into the narrative. It serves as a reminder that sometimes, seeking knowledge or power without respect or caution can unleash dangers far worse than ignorance. This theme gives the story a moral dimension, adding depth to the scares by framing them as results of human choices and hubris. Fear itself is treated almost as a living, breathing entity in the film. Rather than just showing fear as a reaction to external threats, Annabelle delves into how fear grows, spreads, and manipulates. It's contagious, infecting not only individuals but entire environments and relationships. The film shows how fear distorts perception, feeds paranoia, and traps characters in a spiral of dread and helplessness. This thematic layer makes the horror psychologically resonant. It's not just about what's out there in the dark, but what fear does inside us. It's a brilliant way to explore the emotional landscape of terror, making the experience immersive and relatable. Isolation plays a subtle but crucial role as well. As the haunting intensifies, the characters become increasingly cut off from each other, from help, and from their own peace of mind. This physical and emotional isolation amplifies their vulnerability and heightens the suspense. It's a reflection of how trauma and fear can isolate people even when they're surrounded by others, deepening the sense of loneliness and desperation. This theme adds a tragic dimension to the story, making the characters' struggles feel more profound and human. Beyond the immediate narrative, Annabelle touches on the theme of legacy and the inescapability of the past. The cursed history attached to the doll suggests that evil can be passed down, that the sins or horrors of previous generations continue to haunt the present. This cyclical notion of haunting gives the film a sense of inevitability and doom. It's a reminder that some horrors aren't just one-time events but ongoing curses that echo through time, affecting new victims in their wake. What's impressive is how these themes never feel forced or preachy. Instead, they are embedded organically into the film's atmosphere and plot, simmering beneath the surface and inviting viewers to think while they watch. The movie never pauses to deliver a lecture on these ideas. Instead, it lets the themes emerge naturally through characters' experiences, the haunting visuals, and the escalating tension. This subtlety makes the themes more impactful because they feel earned and authentic, rather than shoehorned in. By layering these thought-provoking themes underneath the surface of classic horror elements, Annabelle manages to offer more than just scares. It becomes a meditation on innocence lost, the fragility of safety, the power of faith, the dangers of curiosity, and the pervasive nature of fear. These ideas give the film emotional and intellectual weight, inviting viewers to not only be scared but also to reflect on deeper questions about human nature and the unseen forces that shape our lives. So while you're sitting there on the edge of your seat, heart pounding from the jump scares, there's a quiet, unsettling current running through the film. One that reminds you that the horror isn't just in the shadows or the doll, but in the very themes and messages that touch on our fears, beliefs, and vulnerabilities. It's this blend of classic supernatural terror with meaningful themes that makes Annabelle linger in your mind long after you've stopped watching. When it comes to Annabelle, the visual effects and CGI don't just pop up to dazzle or distract. They work quietly behind the scenes to craft a chilling, immersive world where every shadow and movement feels loaded with menace. What really stands out is how naturally these effects fit into the film's setting and atmosphere, creating a seamless experience that keeps you hooked without ever breaking the spell. The filmmakers clearly knew that horror thrives on atmosphere and subtlety, and they avoided the common pitfall of overusing flashy digital tricks that can make a supernatural film feel cartoonish or artificial. Instead, Annabelle uses its visual effects like a whisper in the dark, sometimes barely noticeable but always amplifying the tension and unease. A big part of why the effects feel so convincing is the brilliant balance struck between practical effects and CGI. The Annabelle doll itself is a masterpiece of practical design. This is no generic prop, but a carefully crafted physical object that feels solid and tangible. There's something deeply unsettling about a real object sitting in the frame, catching the light just so, and having that silent presence that no amount of CGI can replicate. You can sense that the actors are reacting to something real, which in turn makes their fear more authentic and relatable. The doll's worn, vintage look, with its cracked paint and lifeless eyes, immediately sets a tone of eerie familiarity that hooks you into the story's haunted world. But, of course, not everything could be done practically. There are moments when the supernatural demands a touch of digital magic, and this is where the CGI quietly shines without ever calling attention to itself. The filmmakers use CGI sparingly but strategically to animate subtle movements, create ghostly apparitions, and manipulate the environment in ways that feel otherworldly but not over the top. For instance, the doll's slight, unnerving twitches or the brief glimpses of spirits flickering in and out of sight are expertly done to unsettle you without ever feeling fake or distracting. This restraint makes every supernatural effect hit harder because it's rare and unexpected, never saturating the screen with visual noise. What's especially impressive is how the visual effects are integrated with the film's lighting and set design. The environments in Annabelle, dimly lit rooms, shadowy corners, and aging furniture, serve as a perfect canvas for the effects to play off. When a ghostly figure materializes or a shadow shifts unnaturally, the effect feels like a natural extension of the space rather than something pasted on top. This blending of effects and physical sets deepens the immersion, making the haunting feel like it belongs in this specific place and time. The synergy between practical elements and digital enhancements creates a coherent, spooky visual language that constantly keeps you on edge. The film also uses its visual effects to play with your perception in clever ways. Instead of bombarding you with explicit monsters or loud supernatural spectacles, it teases and distorts reality subtly. Walls might seem to breathe, reflections behave oddly, or objects move just out of the corner of your eye. These small, almost subliminal effects build a creeping sense of unease, making you question what's real and what's not. This psychological approach to visual effects is a brilliant choice because horror is as much about what you don't see as what you do. The fear of the unknown is a powerful tool, and Annabelle wields it expertly through its understated digital tricks. Physical interactions in the film, things like doors slamming, objects flying, or the doll moving on its own, are often done with practical effects enhanced by minimal CGI, which grounds the supernatural chaos in reality. When these moments happen, they hit with real weight and immediacy, because you can tell they're anchored in the physical world of the characters. This tactile feel makes the scares more visceral and effective, as you're not just watching digital illusions but witnessing tangible disturbances that could almost be happening in your own home. Even in the movie's more intense, high-stakes sequences, the visual effects team resists the temptation to go overboard. Instead of loud, flashy explosions of CGI, the film keeps a steady hand, focusing on precision and subtlety. This careful pacing of effects means that when something supernatural does appear or escalate, it carries genuine impact and surprise. It respects the audience's intelligence and imagination, inviting viewers to fill in the blanks and engage with the horror on a deeper level rather than spoon-feeding every detail. The film's use of lighting, shadow, and color grading works hand-in-hand with the effects to create a consistently eerie mood. The muted, often sepia-toned palette gives the film an old, timeless feel that complements the vintage doll and the haunted house vibe. This aesthetic choice makes the digital enhancements feel even more organic because they are nestled inside a carefully crafted world that feels both lived in and subtly off-kilter. The effects don't feel like modern digital insertions, but rather like natural disturbances within this shadowy environment. Another clever trick is how the film uses silence and sound to complement the visual effects. Often, the digital ghostly movements or doll twitches happen in near silence, allowing small noises like creaking floors, faint breathing, or distant whispers to heighten the tension. This coordination of visual and audio effects creates an immersive sensory experience that pulls you deeper into the film's world and amplifies the fear factor. Ultimately, the visual effects and CGI in Annabelle don't just serve as flashy showpieces, they are integral to building the film's unsettling atmosphere. The perfect blend of practical and digital effects ensures that the supernatural elements feel real, grounded, and terrifying. Rather than distracting from the story or the characters, the effects enhance every scene, making the horror more believable and the tension more palpable. It's a textbook example of how to use modern technology thoughtfully in horror filmmaking, always in service of mood, story, and genuine scares, never overpowering or cheapening the experience. The result is a haunting visual experience that keeps you guessing, unsettled, and utterly hooked from start to finish. In Annabelle, the set design and locations go far beyond simply providing a background for the story. They actively shape the mood, build tension, and immerse the audience in a world that feels both lived in and deeply unsettling. From the very first scenes, you're pulled into environments so richly detailed and thoughtfully crafted that they practically breathe with a sinister energy all their own. The production design team clearly understood that in a horror film, the spaces characters inhabit are just as important as the characters themselves, because a haunted house or eerie location isn't just a place. It's a container for fear, mystery, and suspense. The main house where much of the story unfolds is a masterpiece of atmospheric design. It isn't just a typical suburban home, but one that carries a heavy, almost oppressive presence. The worn wooden floors creak beneath every step, the wallpaper peels in tired strips, and the shadows hang thick in every corner. This isn't a bright, sanitized space, but a real, lived-in home with a slightly decayed feel that instantly sets the stage for something ominous. Every detail in this house, from the antique furniture to the dimly glowing lamps, feels meticulously chosen to evoke a sense of history and latent dread. The house almost becomes a character itself, with its twisting corridors and shadowy nooks making you feel like danger could spring out from anywhere. The sense of claustrophobia builds naturally as the story progresses, with tighter framing and darker lighting amplifying the feeling that the walls are closing in. Beyond just the house, the other locations in the film add valuable layers to the story's depth and texture. The antique store where the cursed doll is discovered is a particularly memorable setting. It's cluttered, dim, and filled with objects that seem to whisper secrets from forgotten eras. This environment perfectly embodies the mysterious and dangerous aura surrounding Annabelle, making it more than just a simple store. It feels like a portal to a haunted past. The flickering lights, the dust motes in the air, and the narrow aisles stuffed with strange curiosities all contribute to a sense of unease, as if something unseen is lurking just beyond the edges of the frame. The hospital scenes provide a stark contrast with their cold, sterile design, harsh fluorescent lighting, gleaming white walls, and rigid, clinical furniture create a chilling environment that feels suffocating and impersonal. This shift in location style heightens the emotional impact by making you feel the character's vulnerability and isolation in a place where safety seems impossible. The contrast between the warmth of the family home and the harshness of the hospital spaces deepens the visual storytelling and underscores the film's themes of fear and helplessness. The props used throughout the film deserve special attention as well. The Annabelle doll itself is a true standout, a masterclass in practical effects and design. It's an old, worn toy with cracked paint, lifeless eyes, and a threadbare dress that all combine to create an unnerving, almost cursed presence. The doll's design avoids the slick, plastic look of modern toys, instead feeling like an artifact that's been through decades of dark history. This tangible, physical object grounds the supernatural horror in something real and tactile, making its menace feel all the more immediate. Other props, religious artifacts, family photos, everyday household items, are also carefully selected and placed to enrich the environment and subtly hint at the story's deeper layers. Nothing feels random or out of place, which adds to the authenticity and immersive quality of the film's world. Lighting design plays a huge role in enhancing the set design's impact. The filmmakers use shadows and muted color palettes to create a sense of unease and impending doom. Rooms are often bathed in soft, warm light that feels comforting at first but quickly turns eerie as shadows stretch and flicker unnaturally. The interplay of light and dark creates a dynamic visual tension that mirrors the story's emotional beats, making even the most mundane spaces feel charged with potential terror. The careful use of lighting to highlight textures, such as peeling wallpaper or cracked wood, adds to the sense that these places have stories to tell, stories that are dark and unsettling. The era the film is set in is captured with impressive attention to detail, adding another layer of believability. The mid-20th century aesthetic is reflected not only in costumes and cars but throughout the production design, from the style of the furniture to the design of household appliances and even the typography on signs and labels. This historical grounding transports you into a world that feels authentic and lived in, which makes the intrusion of supernatural horror all the more jarring. The blend of the familiar with the uncanny heightens the film's tension because it suggests that the horrors could exist right alongside everyday life. An interesting dimension of the set design is how it reflects the characters' emotional and psychological journeys. As the story progresses and the haunting intensifies, the spaces become darker, more cluttered, and less safe-looking. This visual decay parallels the growing fear and breakdown within the family, making the environment an external reflection of internal turmoil. The contrast between order and chaos, light and shadow, safety and threat is carefully maintained through the design choices, making the set itself a storytelling tool that deepens the narrative without words. Even the exterior settings contribute significantly to the film's mood. The quiet suburban streets, bathed in soft twilight or cloaked in darkness, create an eerie dissonance, peaceful on the surface but hiding something sinister underneath. This juxtaposition of normalcy and horror taps into a primal fear that evil can lurk just behind the facade of everyday life, and the film's locations bring that fear vividly to life. In every room, on every street, and in every object, the set design and locations in Annabelle work together to build a world that's both believable and deeply unsettling. The environments don't just hold the story, they amplify it, pulling you deeper into the horror and making the supernatural elements feel real and immediate. It's this careful, layered craftsmanship that keeps you glued to the screen, feeling like you're walking alongside the characters through a place where the past's dark shadows are never far behind. When diving deeper into the dialogue and script of Annabelle, what really stands out is how the writing skillfully balances simplicity and subtlety to serve the film's eerie atmosphere without ever feeling overly complicated or forced. The script doesn't aim to dazzle with flashy or elaborate lines. Instead, it relies on naturalistic conversations that make the characters feel like real people facing extraordinary, terrifying events. This grounded approach to dialogue is a smart choice because it roots the supernatural horror in something relatable, real human fear, confusion, and vulnerability, which only makes the unsettling moments more impactful. From the very beginning, the dialogue establishes an everyday normalcy that lulls the audience into a sense of comfort, making the gradual creep of horror feel all the more jarring. Family discussions about routine matters, casual exchanges between husband and wife, or even small talk with secondary characters feel authentic and unforced, as if we're overhearing real conversations rather than scripted lines. This naturalness is crucial because it creates a believable world where the sudden and horrific intrusion of the cursed doll feels more disruptive and shocking. The familiar cadence of these everyday exchanges makes the shift to terror hit harder, playing with our expectations and emotional responses. One of the script's strongest tools is its restraint in revealing too much too soon. Instead of bombarding the audience with exposition about the doll's dark origins or the specifics of the curse in lengthy monologues, the story unfolds through carefully placed hints and casual mentions. This slow drip of information keeps the mystery alive, allowing tension to build organically. Characters share bits and pieces of the backstory in quiet moments or react with dread and disbelief, which invites the audience to piece together the puzzle alongside them. This method avoids the trap of info dumps that can break the tension and instead keeps viewers engaged and curious, maintaining a suspenseful pace throughout. The emotional weight carried by the dialogue is often understated but powerful. The conversations between the main couple, in particular, reveal their growing fear, frustration, and desperation in a way that feels genuine and relatable. Their exchanges are filled with pauses, unfinished thoughts, and carefully chosen words that convey more than what's on the surface. These subtle nuances highlight how the haunting affects not just their surroundings, but their relationship and mental states. Rather than relying on over-the-top drama, the script opts for moments of quiet, tense vulnerability, like whispered reassurances in the dark or strained arguments fueled by fear, that resonate because they feel true to life. This emotional realism grounds the horror in human experience, making the supernatural threats feel personal and immediate. While Annabelle may not be packed with quotable lines or witty repartee, the script does feature moments of impactful writing that linger with the audience. Certain lines capture the ominous nature of the doll or the inescapable darkness surrounding the family with a chilling economy of words. These phrases often come at key moments, delivered with measured pacing that allows their meaning to sink in fully. The writing respects silence and the power of what's left unsaid, using tension and atmosphere to enhance the spoken words rather than overshadow them. This approach means that memorable lines don't have to be flashy or loud. Their effectiveness lies in timing and delivery within the mood of the scene. Another impressive aspect of the script is its attention to character voice. Each character speaks in a way that reflects their background, personality, and emotional state without ever feeling like they're delivering scripted exposition. The husband's cautious skepticism contrasts with the wife's faith and hope, and these differences come through naturally in how they express themselves. This thoughtful character differentiation through dialogue adds layers of depth, allowing the audience to understand motivations, fears, and conflicts even when the plot isn't directly addressed. It's subtle character building that enriches the story and makes the characters more relatable and complex. The script also cleverly uses pauses, glances, and unfinished sentences to communicate tension and fear that words alone can't fully express. Many scenes are heavy with subtext, where characters are on the brink of panic or revelation but hold back, mirroring how real people behave when confronted with the supernatural or unknown. These moments invite the audience to read between the lines, heightening the suspense and emotional involvement. The restraint in dialogue here allows the atmosphere to take center stage, with silence and body language doing much of the storytelling work. The interaction between dialogue and sound design also plays a crucial role. The script leaves room for pauses that allow ambient noises, the creak of a floorboard, distant whispers, or an unsettling silence, to fill the space and amplify unease. This interplay between spoken words and sound deepens immersion and makes scenes more gripping. The careful scripting ensures dialogue never feels rushed or cluttered, but instead works in harmony with the film's auditory elements to build tension. Ultimately, the script and dialogue in Annabelle excel because they embrace a less is more philosophy that fits perfectly with the horror genre. They provide a strong emotional core without overwhelming the supernatural mystery, using naturalistic speech, carefully paced revelations, and rich subtext to keep audiences invested. It's a quiet craftsmanship that values atmosphere, character depth, and timing over spectacle or bombast, proving that sometimes the most chilling moments come not from what's said, but from what's left hanging in the air between the words. When we really unpack the genre execution in Annabelle, the film reveals a fascinating dance between embracing classic horror tropes and injecting just enough originality to keep things engaging and far from predictable. It's like the movie knows exactly what scares us. Those dark, shadowy corners, the eerie creaks in the silence, the unsettling presence of a doll that should be harmless but feels anything but, and it uses those familiar elements as a foundation. But rather than being content with merely repeating what's been done before, it builds upon those conventions to craft an experience that feels both comfortingly recognizable and chillingly fresh. The film leans into the classic haunted object storyline, which is arguably one of the oldest horror staples. A cursed doll, innocent on the surface but packed with malevolent supernatural energy, is the perfect vessel to tap into deep-seated fears rooted in childhood innocence twisted into something sinister. This trope is well-worn, sure, but Annabelle uses it as a springboard to explore something deeper. Instead of a straightforward ghost story or possession tale, the film layers the supernatural horror with human emotions, grief, guilt, fear, that create a multidimensional experience. The doll isn't just an evil presence. It's almost a catalyst for revealing the character's vulnerabilities and how trauma can distort reality. What's especially interesting about Annabelle as genre play is its pacing and tension-building approach. It doesn't opt for a relentless barrage of jump scares, which can sometimes numb the audience to fear. Instead, it takes a slow-burn route, carefully layering suspense over time. The film understands that horror is as much about what you don't see as what you do, using shadows, silence, and suggestion to keep viewers on edge. This technique is a hallmark of effective horror, and it's executed with a level of craft that respects the audience's intelligence and patience. The quiet, tense moments between scares build a lingering unease, making each scare land with greater emotional impact. In terms of balancing elements like suspense, action, and emotional drama, Annabelle walks a careful line. The movie isn't packed with action sequences. Those moments are rare but strategically placed to punctuate the rising tension. Most of the runtime is devoted to slow-building dread and character reactions, which gives the scares more context and emotional weight. This balance prevents the film from feeling like a roller coaster of cheap thrills and instead creates a more immersive and sustained horror experience. Interestingly, Annabelle chooses to keep humor almost completely out of the equation. Many modern horror films blend scares with comic relief to ease tension and make the scares hit harder by contrast, but here, the tone remains relentlessly serious. This decision might feel risky because it removes the emotional breathers that some viewers rely on, but it also reinforces the film's oppressive, grim atmosphere. The absence of humor intensifies the feeling that the evil in the story is inescapable and relentless, which adds to the overall impact. Another layer of freshness comes from the film's connection to the larger Conjuring universe. While Annabelle stands alone as a story, it also functions as a piece in a bigger mythological puzzle. This shared universe approach isn't extremely common in the horror genre, which often focuses on standalone tales. The interconnected storytelling adds extra intrigue for fans who recognize the references and appreciate the world building. It creates a sense that the horror is part of something bigger and more terrifying, which deepens the narrative stakes and adds complexity to the genre formula. That said, Annabelle does lean on some well-worn horror cliches, the haunted object causing escalating chaos, characters initially skeptical who slowly become believers. The classic things get worse after you try to contain the evil storyline. However, instead of feeling tired or overdone, these familiar elements are presented with enough style and subtle innovation to feel fresh. The movie doesn't just repeat cliches for convenience, it uses them as narrative tools, knowing the audience's expectations and playing with them to generate suspense rather than boredom. The script also ensures that the emotional and psychological elements never take a backseat to the scares. The characters' fears, regrets, and relationships provide an emotional anchor that enriches the horror. This depth is crucial because it means the supernatural events aren't happening in a vacuum. They affect real people in meaningful ways. The balance between human drama and supernatural terror makes the scares feel earned and impactful rather than gratuitous. Visually and atmospherically, the film adheres to genre expectations. Dim lighting, claustrophobic interiors, and unsettling set pieces, but it also uses these conventions effectively to enhance the mood rather than relying on them as shortcuts. The way the film frames the doll, shadows, and eerie locations contributes heavily to the genre vibe, creating a sense of dread that feels immersive. These stylistic choices complement the script and performances, rounding out a well-executed genre experience. In essence, Annabelle is a masterclass in how to work within the horror genre's boundaries while still keeping the experience engaging and unpredictable. It embraces what audiences love about haunted object stories and supernatural thrillers, but it also layers an emotional complexity, pacing finesse, and subtle world-building to elevate the material. The film neither abandons nor blindly follows genre conventions. Instead, it respects them and adds its own twist, resulting in a horror experience that's as familiar as it is refreshingly effective. This thoughtful blend is what makes Annabelle stand out, not by reinventing the wheel but by making sure every turn is purposeful, every scare deliberate, and every moment charged with a sense of looming dread that stays with you long after the credits roll. When we take a closer look at Annabelle through the lens of social and cultural commentary, it's quite fascinating how a horror film centered on a possessed doll can subtly capture and reflect broader societal anxieties and cultural undercurrents. Now, this isn't a film that openly marches in with a bold political message or tries to tackle major contemporary issues head-on. Instead, it gently weaves in themes and emotions that resonate on a deeper, more universal level, making the horror feel connected to real-life fears and tensions without ever feeling preachy or forced. One of the most compelling layers in Annabelle is how it portrays fear, not just the immediate, jump-scare type, but the slow-burning, ever-present fear that exists beneath the surface of everyday life. This is the kind of fear tied to the unknown, to uncertainty about the future, and to the feeling that there are forces beyond our control that can disrupt the fragile stability we work so hard to maintain. The film's supernatural evil acts almost as a metaphor for these intangible threats, the kind that linger in the back of our minds and shape our behavior in ways we don't always fully recognize. In that sense, the doll becomes more than a creepy object. It symbolizes the invisible pressures and anxieties many people carry with them, whether about family, safety, or faith. The setting and time period of the film play a significant role in enhancing these social and cultural themes. Taking place in the early 1970s, Annabelle situates its story at a crossroads of cultural change, a time when traditional family values were increasingly challenged by shifting social norms and broader societal transformations. The family's attempt to build a safe and stable home amidst these changes feels like a microcosm of the era's broader struggles. The creeping supernatural menace parallels the sense of instability and vulnerability that many felt during that time, reflecting the fear that the old certainties were eroding and leaving people exposed to new kinds of dangers, both real and imagined. This historical backdrop adds texture and depth, making the story's horror feel like an expression of cultural unease, rather than just a simple ghost story. Another key aspect where Annabelle touches on social commentary is in its exploration of faith, belief, and skepticism. Throughout the film, characters wrestle with whether to accept the supernatural events they experience or dismiss them as impossible. This tension between belief and doubt mirrors larger cultural dialogues about religion, spirituality, and the role those forces play in people's lives, especially in moments of crisis. The film doesn't advocate for one side or the other, but instead highlights the human need to find meaning and protection in something greater when confronted with inexplicable horror. In doing so, it reflects a timeless cultural conversation about how faith can both comfort and complicate our understanding of the world. Importantly, Annabelle handles these themes with a light touch. It never feels like it's forcing a message down the audience's throat or trying to turn the film into a social critique. Instead, these themes emerge naturally from the characters' experiences and the story's emotional core. This subtlety is what allows the social and cultural elements to enhance the horror rather than distract from it, giving the film an organic depth that rewards viewers willing to look beneath the surface scares. The family dynamics in the film also carry social resonance. At its heart, Annabelle is about a family trying to protect their home and each other from a malevolent force. This taps into universal themes of love, vulnerability, and the desire to keep one's loved ones safe from harm. In a broader sense, the story reflects societal anxieties about the fragility of family and community in uncertain times. The way the characters respond to the growing threat, through denial, fear, sacrifice, and resilience, speaks to the complexity of human relationships under pressure. The supernatural horror amplifies these emotional truths, turning personal struggles into something larger and more intense. While Annabelle doesn't explicitly tackle contemporary political issues like social injustice, economic inequality, or cultural conflicts, its exploration of fear, trust, and human vulnerability feels very timely. In an age where the world often seems unpredictable and full of unseen threats, whether through pandemics, political unrest, or environmental crises, the film's themes resonate quietly but powerfully. The sense that danger is lurking just beyond the edges of our everyday lives, waiting to invade our safe spaces, is something that many viewers can relate to on a subconscious level. Moreover, the film's approach to these topics reflects a broader trend in horror storytelling, using supernatural elements as metaphors for real human fears and societal issues. Instead of delivering a straightforward message, Annabelle invites audiences to project their own anxieties onto the story, making the horror feel personal and relevant. This kind of storytelling can be more impactful because it engages viewers on multiple levels, not just entertaining them with scares, but also prompting reflection on the fears and uncertainties that shape our world. All in all, Annabelle stands out because it quietly infuses its horror narrative with social and cultural commentary that feels authentic and meaningful without overshadowing the genre elements. It uses the haunted doll and the supernatural curse as lenses to explore universal human concerns about safety, faith, and the unknown. These themes are woven into the film's fabric in a way that enriches the viewing experience, making the scares resonate beyond the screen and linger in the mind. So while it might be easy to dismiss Annabelle as just another horror movie, it's really much more. A story that taps into the collective unease of its time and offers a reflection on the fears that connect us all. Annabelle has this magnetic pull that grabs hold of viewers from the very first frame and doesn't let go, creating an experience that's as emotionally gripping as it is terrifying. Right off the bat, the film plunges you into a world where unease lurks around every corner, where a simple doll can become the source of your deepest fears. This tension isn't just surface-level jump scares, it's a slow-building, creeping dread that wraps itself around the audience, pulling them deeper into the story. You can feel it in your chest, that tight knot of suspense that keeps you glued to the screen, eyes darting at every shadow, ears straining for the slightest creak or whisper. This kind of tension is more than just scary, it's immersive, making you feel like you're part of the unfolding nightmare rather than just a bystander watching from a safe distance. The emotional roller coaster Annabelle puts its audience through is multi-layered and skillfully crafted. It balances moments of sheer terror with quieter, more vulnerable scenes that let the characters' humanity shine through. The parents' desperation to protect their daughter, the fear etched on their faces, the helplessness that grows as the supernatural menace tightens its grip. These moments hit hard because they tap into universal feelings of love, anxiety, and helplessness. When the horror ramps up again, it feels all the more intense because you're emotionally invested in the characters, not just watching scary things happen to faceless victims. The movie knows how to make you care, and that emotional connection turns simple jump scares into gut punches. Speaking of scares, Annabelle uses surprise and shock with masterful timing. The film knows exactly when to yank the rug out from under you with a sudden, unexpected scare that jolts your senses awake. These moments aren't just thrown in randomly for cheap thrills. They're carefully woven into the narrative fabric, tied to the characters' arcs or to the atmosphere, which makes them more effective and memorable. Because you never quite know when the next scare will hit, the tension remains taut throughout, keeping the audience on edge. It's this unpredictability that makes watching the film an adrenaline-fueled experience, where every creak or flicker of light feels loaded with potential terror. Beyond the immediate reactions of fear and shock, Annabelle also encourages viewers to engage on a more thoughtful level. The mystery of the doll's origins and the curse that follows it invites curiosity and speculation. Fans find themselves wanting to discuss the film's backstory, share theories, and piece together the clues dropped throughout the movie. This element of intrigue extends the viewing experience beyond the screen, turning it into a communal event where people connect over shared chills and theories. It's the kind of movie that rewards multiple viewings because there's always something new to notice or interpret, making the engagement last long after the credits roll. What's particularly interesting about Annabelle is how it taps into primal, almost universal fears, those that transcend culture and age. The idea of an everyday object turning sinister plays on deep-seated anxieties about trust and safety in the familiar, making the horror feel personal and immediate. It's not just about ghosts or demons. It's about the unsettling notion that the safe spaces and things we hold dear could turn against us at any moment. This connection to a core human fear elevates the film's impact and helps explain why it resonates so powerfully with such a wide audience. The film's pacing plays a crucial role in maintaining this emotional engagement. It doesn't rush through the story or overload viewers with non-stop scares. Instead, it carefully balances quieter moments with bursts of terror, giving the audience time to breathe, process, and emotionally connect with the characters. This ebb and flow prevent fatigue and keep the suspense fresh, making the moments of horror hit even harder. The rhythm of the film acts almost like a heartbeat, steady but capable of sudden spikes that keep you alert and emotionally invested throughout. Sound design and music also play an indispensable role in drawing viewers in emotionally. The subtle ambient noises, the creaking floorboards, distant whispers, and eerie silences work in tandem with the haunting score to create a sensory landscape that amplifies tension and unease. The score's careful timing, rising just enough to nudge your emotions without overwhelming the scene, enhances every twist and turn. It's a masterclass in using audio to deepen the emotional impact, making the experience feel immersive and visceral. All these elements combine to create a film experience that's more than just a series of scares. It's an emotional journey. The fear Annabelle generates is intertwined with empathy and suspense, making viewers root for the characters even as they brace for the worst. You're not just watching a haunted doll story, you're living it alongside the characters, feeling their dread, hope, and desperation. This emotional investment makes the film memorable and impactful, inviting viewers to revisit it, discuss it, and reflect on it long after the screen goes dark. Ultimately, Annabelle excels at making the audience feel something deeply, whether it's shock, sympathy, or breathless anticipation. It's this blend of emotional resonance and well-crafted horror that keeps viewers coming back, turning a simple ghost story into a shared experience that captivates and haunts. The film's power lies not just in its scares, but in its ability to connect, engage, and linger in the mind, making it a standout in the horror genre for emotional impact and audience involvement. When you dig deeper into how Annabelle stacks up against other films in the horror genre, especially those focusing on haunted dolls or cursed objects, you realize it's playing with a formula that's been around for decades, but it does so with a mix of reverence and fresh creativity that keeps things engaging. The haunted doll trope is nothing new. It's a classic setup where an innocent-looking toy becomes a vessel for something evil, flipping something comforting into something terrifying. Yet, Annabelle takes this well-worn concept and layers it with a sense of real-world mystique that many other films lack. Unlike purely fictional haunted doll movies, Annabelle draws from a supposedly true story rooted in the lore of Ed and Lorraine Warren's investigations. This gives the film an eerie authenticity that hooks the audience on a different level, because it's not just a made-up tale, it's linked to actual paranormal history, which is both fascinating and unsettling. Now, if you compare Annabelle directly to its cinematic cousins in the Conjuring universe, it's like zooming in on a smaller, yet equally chilling chapter of a larger saga. While the Conjuring movies often focus on the investigators and the big, scary hauntings they confront, Annabelle switches gears to concentrate on the doll itself and the personal tragedy it inflicts on one family. This shift creates a more claustrophobic, intimate horror experience, like being trapped in a haunted house with the evil entity itself rather than watching from afar. This focus on personal terror makes the story feel more immediate and intense, and it explores the ways evil can seep into everyday life, rather than just being a distant, supernatural event. It's a clever way to expand the franchise's mythology while keeping the storytelling fresh and emotionally grounded. When you put Annabelle side by side with other haunted doll movies like Child's Play or Dead Silence, the tone differences become quite striking. Child's Play tends to lean into horror mixed with a bit of dark humor and outright slasher vibes, while Dead Silence plays heavily on urban legends and ghost story traditions. Annabelle, by contrast, commits to a slow-building, atmospheric style of horror. It's less about gore or crazed doll rampages and more about psychological tension, creeping dread, and supernatural malevolence that simmers under the surface. This approach makes the scares more unsettling because they're tied to an invisible force manipulating events rather than just a physical antagonist going on a killing spree. It taps into primal fears, like losing control over your own home and safety, and plays them out through unsettling visuals and eerie silences rather than flashy effects. Looking at the director's body of work, Annabelle fits neatly into a tradition of horror films that honor classic techniques but still feel modern. The director's use of lighting, shadow, and camera angles pays homage to legendary horror filmmakers, drawing on the power of suggestion and subtlety to keep viewers on edge. The pacing and shot composition show a sophisticated understanding of how to build tension gradually, often making the mundane feel terrifying. This stylistic choice gives the film a timeless quality. It could be from a golden age of horror, but is filmed with today's technology and sensibility, which helps it avoid feeling like a mere copycat. From a storytelling perspective, Annabelle follows a familiar narrative arc, a cursed object causing havoc, innocent victims caught in the crossfire, and escalating supernatural terror, but it adds layers by weaving in themes of faith, family, and desperation. The characters aren't just there to scream and run, they have emotional stakes and personal conflicts that the supernatural events exacerbate. This grounding in real human emotion elevates the film beyond simple genre fare, making the horror feel earned rather than arbitrary. The blend of the spiritual and the terrifying adds depth that isn't always present in other haunted doll movies. Compared to many recent supernatural horror films that rely heavily on jump scares and CGI, Annabelle shows restraint. It spaces out its scares, allowing suspense to build naturally rather than bombarding the audience nonstop. This measured approach keeps viewers emotionally invested and prevents the fatigue that often comes with too many sudden shocks. The film knows that sometimes less is more, and it leverages silence, shadows, and atmosphere to maintain a constant sense of unease that lingers long after the scary moments pass. Even though Annabelle embraces some of the typical haunted doll tropes, it manages to inject enough originality through its connection to real-life paranormal stories, a focus on intimate family drama, and a carefully crafted atmosphere. This balance helps it stand out in a crowded field where many similar movies can feel disposable or overly formulaic. It doesn't just retell an old story, it reinvents it with a distinct voice and a solid narrative foundation. So when you think about Annabelle's place in the horror landscape, it's a film that respects the genre's traditions while pushing just enough boundaries to keep things fresh. It's a familiar tale told with skill and care, offering both fans of haunted doll stories and newcomers a chilling experience that feels both classic and new. This blend of homage and innovation is what gives Annabelle its unique flavor and why it continues to be a memorable entry in the world of supernatural horror cinema. Annabelle is far more than just a chilling tale about a haunted doll. It's a film layered with symbolism and metaphorical richness that sneaks in beneath the surface, quietly amplifying the horror and emotional impact. The doll itself is the centerpiece of this symbolic web, embodying the corruption of innocence in the most unsettling way. Dolls traditionally represent childhood purity, comfort, and safety, a companion to a child's imagination and play. But Annabelle twists that familiar symbol into a dark and malevolent force, embodying the way something once innocent can be tainted by evil. This corrupted innocence becomes a powerful metaphor for the disruption of safety and the invasion of darkness into the familiar and the personal, reflecting how the family's world is invaded by forces they cannot control or understand. Lighting and shadow play huge roles not just in setting the mood, but in reinforcing deeper meanings throughout the film. Darkness in Annabelle symbolizes the unknown, the unseen dangers lurking just out of sight, and the evil forces that thrive in concealment. Shadows stretch and flicker in ways that suggest more than just physical presence. They hint at hidden malevolence and the fragility of a character's sense of security. The moments when light flickers or dims aren't random, they metaphorically represent moments of doubt, fear, and vulnerability. Light, often associated with safety and hope, here becomes fragile and fleeting, as if the fight between good and evil is a delicate balance that can tip at any moment. This use of light and dark not only heightens the tension but underscores the thematic battle between protection and corruption, faith and despair. The house setting serves as more than just a backdrop. It's a living symbol of the character's psychological and spiritual descent. Initially a safe haven and a symbol of family unity, the house gradually becomes a prison filled with secrets and growing dread. The shifting atmosphere within the home mirrors the internal unraveling of the characters' lives as evil invades their sanctuary. Each creaky floorboard, each locked door, and every dimly lit hallway feels charged with meaning, representing the dark secrets and fears that are never fully visible but always present. The house becomes a metaphor for the fragility of perceived safety, how the walls around us can trap us just as much as they protect us, and how evil can take root in the very spaces we consider our refuge. Religious imagery and symbolism are woven thoughtfully throughout the film, adding a profound spiritual dimension to the horror. Objects like crucifixes, holy water, and prayers are not mere props but signifiers of the ongoing spiritual warfare beneath the surface. This conflict between light and darkness isn't just physical but metaphysical, with faith acting as both a shield and a source of vulnerability. The characters' struggles with their beliefs, between hope and doubt, reflect the film's larger theme of battling evil on both worldly and spiritual planes. It's this interplay that enriches the story, making the horror more than just scary visuals. It becomes a struggle of souls and beliefs, adding emotional weight and complexity. Recurring visual motifs such as broken glass and mirrors add even more layers of meaning. Mirrors traditionally symbolize self-reflection and truth, but in Annabelle, reflections are often distorted or reveal more than what's on the surface, symbolizing that reality is fractured and that appearances are deceptive. Broken glass symbolizes shattered safety, broken trust, and the fragility of the characters' lives under siege. These motifs work silently but powerfully, reinforcing the idea that the character's world is splintering, both externally in the form of supernatural threats and internally through fear and psychological strain. Even the film's pacing and rhythm carry symbolic weight. The slow, deliberate build-up followed by sudden, jarring scares mimics the unpredictable nature of evil itself, quiet and lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike. This ebb and flow draws viewers into the constant tension and unease experienced by the characters, making the horror feel less like a series of jumps and more like an immersive experience of living under a shadow. The unpredictability becomes a metaphor for the chaos that evil introduces into what should be orderly, safe lives. All these symbolic and metaphorical layers do more than add complexity. They transform Annabelle from a straightforward haunted doll story into a multifaceted narrative exploring themes of corruption, vulnerability, faith, and the unseen battles between good and evil. They invite viewers to look beyond the surface scares and discover the deeper ideas about how darkness infiltrates everyday life and how spiritual strength and human resilience are tested under pressure. So when watching Annabelle, keep an eye out for these subtle clues and symbolic moments. They enrich the story, deepen the scares, and give you plenty to think about long after the credits roll. Annabelle is much more than just a standalone horror flick. It's a key piece in the sprawling Conjuring universe, one of the most successful and beloved horror franchises in recent years. When you watch Annabelle, you're not just watching a scary story about a cursed doll. You're stepping into a richly connected cinematic world that expands and deepens with every new installment. The Conjuring universe began with the Conjuring films, which follow the real-life paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. Annabelle, the doll itself, is a recurring figure in that universe, infamous for its evil presence and the havoc it wreaks. This film acts as a prequel, digging deep into the origins of the doll's curse and how the nightmare began, which adds a whole new layer of understanding and dread for fans who have already seen the other films. The way Annabelle fits into the franchise is pretty clever. Instead of rehashing the usual haunted doll tropes, it explores the backstory of how the doll was possessed and became a conduit for a dark entity. This origin story enriches the lore of the Conjuring universe by showing the domino effect of evil, how one cursed object can ripple through different lives and timelines. It's like uncovering the dark genealogy of horror artifacts, giving us the before the Warrens got involved perspective that's both thrilling and terrifying. This makes Annabelle not just a scary movie, but an essential chapter that helps piece together the larger narrative puzzle the franchise is building. Setting the film in the early 1970s adds a strong historical flavor that does more than just provide a cool retro vibe. It anchors the supernatural events in a specific cultural and social context, a time when paranormal stories were becoming mainstream but were still met with skepticism. The period details, from the fashion and hairstyles to the cars and home decor, help create an immersive world that feels authentic and lived in. This grounding makes the supernatural elements stand out more sharply against the familiar and nostalgic backdrop, amplifying the sense of intrusion and disruption when evil invades what should be a safe, ordinary home. It's a clever move because it plays with our real-world history and fears from that era, making the story feel like it could have actually happened in some quiet suburban neighborhood. Moreover, the historical context complements the franchise's ongoing theme of faith versus evil. The 1970s setting, with its cultural mix of traditional beliefs and rising skepticism, mirrors the characters' own struggles with belief in the supernatural and their attempts to protect themselves using faith and ritual. This is not just about ghosts and demons, it's about the human condition, about confronting the unknown with hope, fear, and doubt. The movie uses this tension to add emotional weight and thematic depth, making the horror resonate on a psychological and spiritual level, which has become a signature of the Conjuring universe. From a franchise perspective, Annabelle also sets the tone for how interconnected stories can build suspense and a richer mythology. It introduces not only the haunted doll, but hints at a wider network of cursed objects and dark forces that the Warrens encounter. This world-building turns the films into chapters of a larger saga rather than isolated scares, encouraging viewers to look for clues and connections between movies. Fans love this because it rewards attention to detail and sparks conversations about timelines, characters, and supernatural lore. It's almost like a horror puzzle that unfolds gradually, with Annabelle being one of the earliest and most chilling pieces. The film also taps into the real-life fame of the Warrens and their investigations, which adds a unique layer of authenticity to the horror. Even though the movie dramatizes events for cinematic effect, knowing that it's inspired by supposedly true cases makes the scares hit closer to home. This blend of fact and fiction is a powerful draw for the franchise, and Annabelle plays right into that by portraying the terrifying consequences of meddling with dark forces that the Warrens would later battle. It grounds the supernatural in reality, which makes the fear feel more immediate and personal. Finally, Annabelle exemplifies how the Conjuring universe balances scares with emotional storytelling. The film doesn't just aim to frighten. It explores the human side of the horror, the fear, vulnerability, and desperation of ordinary people facing unimaginable evil. This emotional core makes the movie more than just a ghost story. It's a portrait of how faith, love, and courage can be tested and strained by darkness. This approach gives the film a resonance that lingers beyond the jump scares, inviting audiences to connect with the characters on a deeper level. In sum, Annabelle functions as both a thrilling horror origin story and a crucial building block in the Conjuring universe. Its rich historical setting, intertwined mythology, and emotional depth make it a standout chapter in a franchise that has redefined modern supernatural horror. Watching Annabelle means diving into a world where every cursed object, every dark secret, and every whispered prayer is part of a much larger, ongoing battle between light and darkness, a battle that continues to captivate and terrify audiences around the globe. When looking closely at Annabelle's budget and box office performance, you start to appreciate the clever balancing act between cost efficiency and cinematic impact that the filmmakers pulled off. With a reported production budget around $6.5 million, Annabelle falls into what many would consider a low-budget category, especially when you compare it to the blockbuster standards of Hollywood, where budgets can soar into the hundreds of millions. But what's remarkable here is how the film manages to use this relatively small budget so effectively to craft an unsettling atmosphere, strong visual storytelling, and convincing scares without feeling cheap or rushed. The filmmakers made smart choices, prioritizing mood, tension, practical effects, and minimalist set design, which means the film doesn't rely on expensive CGI or star-studded casts to capture the audience's attention. This proves a crucial lesson in horror filmmaking. You don't need a massive budget to make something truly scary if you have a clear vision and know how to manipulate suspense. On the flip side, the financial return Annabelle generated is nothing short of extraordinary, especially when you do the math. Globally, the film grossed over $257 million, which means it earned nearly 40 times its budget in revenue. For studios and investors, that's the kind of profit margin that dreams are made of. This phenomenal box office success catapulted Annabelle into the spotlight as a standout example of a profitable horror movie and solidified the Conjuring universe's place as a serious contender in the world of franchise filmmaking. It's a textbook case showing how horror, with its devoted fan base and generally lower production costs, can deliver some of the highest returns in the industry. The marketing strategy behind Annabelle played a significant role in amplifying its financial success. Riding the wave of popularity created by The Conjuring, released just a year before, the promotional campaign smartly positioned Annabelle as a prequel and a key piece of the larger Conjuring puzzle. By leveraging the audience's existing curiosity and affection for the Warrens cases, the marketing created anticipation and trust that this film would deliver a similar spooky thrill. Trailers were crafted to tease just enough eerie moments without revealing the full story, leaving viewers eager to see how this cursed doll's terrifying journey began. The marketing also capitalized on the based on true events angle, a popular tactic in horror that adds an extra layer of intrigue and dread, making audiences wonder if the scares they see on screen might have roots in reality. Audience reaction was interesting because it didn't perfectly align with critical reviews, but that didn't seem to hurt the film's box office at all. While some critics found the story somewhat predictable or thin, many viewers found the film's chilling atmosphere and connection to the beloved Conjuring franchise compelling enough to enjoy it thoroughly. The movie resonated strongly with horror fans who appreciated its creepy, slow-burn tension and the way it deepened the franchise lore. Positive word of mouth among this core group helped sustain box office momentum beyond the opening weeks, which is often key for horror movies that rely on atmosphere rather than action-packed sequences to keep audiences coming back. The fact that it sparked discussion and curiosity about the wider Conjuring universe also boosted its staying power in theaters. From a production standpoint, the smart use of the budget meant focusing on what really matters in horror, creating suspense and atmosphere. Instead of pouring money into star actors or blockbuster special effects, the filmmakers invested in practical set designs, carefully crafted lighting, and subtle sound design that built tension without overwhelming the senses. This economical approach also allowed for more creative freedom in making the dull and haunting sequences feel tangible and unsettling, rather than relying on flashy digital effects that can sometimes pull viewers out of the experience. The restrained but effective use of effects shows that you don't need to spend a fortune on CGI to freak people out. Sometimes it's the suggestion, the shadows, and the creaks in the night that do the most damage. Moreover, The success of Annabelle inspired a trend in horror filmmaking that demonstrated how studios can make profitable movies with tight budgets while still aiming for franchise potential. It reinforced the idea that horror audiences crave quality storytelling and atmosphere, and that these elements can translate into substantial box office returns if marketed well. This impact can be seen in the wave of similarly budgeted horror films released since then, many of which have also found financial success by focusing on strong concepts and smart production rather than just star power or expensive effects. It's also worth noting that the timing of Annabelle's release contributed to its box office triumph. Coming on the heels of The Conjuring, it arrived when supernatural horror was enjoying a resurgence, and audiences were hungry for more interconnected spooky stories. The familiarity of the franchise branding reassured viewers that they were getting a quality scare experience, which is crucial in a genre where so many movies can feel disposable. This sense of continuity and world-building helped Annabelle stand out from the crowded horror market. All in all, Annabelle is a shining example of how a modest budget combined with smart storytelling, clever marketing, and a strong franchise connection can create a horror hit that rakes in huge profits. It's a film that proves you don't need to spend hundreds of millions to make an impact. Sometimes all it takes is a well-crafted story, a creepy doll, and the right marketing push to turn a small investment into a blockbuster success. This financial performance didn't just benefit the film itself, but helped pave the way for future installments and similar projects that continue to thrill and terrify audiences around the world. If you're eager to dive into the creepy, chilling world of Annabelle and experience those spine-tingling moments firsthand, you're probably wondering exactly where you can watch this horror gem. Well, the good news is Annabelle has been made widely accessible across several platforms, so there's no excuse to miss out on the doll's terrifying tale. Depending on what kind of movie-watching vibe you're after, there are multiple ways to catch it, each offering a slightly different experience. First up, if you love that classic cinematic thrill, the darkness, the booming sound system, the communal gasps and startled jump scares, keep an eye out for any special theater re-releases or horror film marathons. While Annabelle originally hit theaters back in 2014, it sometimes pops up in theaters again as part of seasonal horror events or special screenings, especially around Halloween. Watching it on the big screen lets you soak in the atmosphere fully. The subtle lighting, sudden scares, and eerie sound design really come alive when the room goes dark and the volume cranks up. It's the kind of movie where being surrounded by fellow horror fans only amplifies the tension and excitement. For the majority of viewers, though, streaming is the go-to option these days, and Annabelle is generally available on major streaming platforms, especially those that focus on genre content. Whether you subscribe to services like HBO Max, Peacock, or others that house the Conjuring universe films, you'll often find Annabelle ready to stream instantly. Streaming it at home offers the advantage of convenience. You can watch it in your own spooky setup, maybe with the lights off and headphones on, tailoring the experience to your own comfort level. Plus, streaming allows you to pause, rewind, or watch those particularly scary scenes a second time to catch every detail. It's perfect for horror buffs who like to dissect the scares and set design. If you're more of a digital collector or prefer owning your movies, Annabelle is also available for purchase or rental on platforms like Amazon Prime Video, iTunes, Google Play Movies, and Vudu. Renting is a budget-friendly option if you want a one-time watch without committing to a full purchase, while buying the digital copy lets you add it permanently to your library. Handy if you think you'll want to revisit the film during those late-night horror binges. The digital versions often come with the added bonus of bonus features like behind-the-scenes footage, director's commentary, or deleted scenes, which can deepen your appreciation for the filmmaking process and the care that went into creating those unsettling moments. For the absolute fullest impact, watching Annabelle at night, preferably in a dark room with good sound, really makes the creepy doll's presence feel more intense. Maybe throw in some atmospheric elements like a flickering lamp or the quiet creaks of a house settling to get yourself fully immersed. The film's use of shadows, silence, and sudden noises is designed to sneak up on you, so creating a cozy but eerie viewing environment will amplify those effects. Watching with friends who also enjoy horror can turn it into a fun, shared scare fest, but if you're brave enough, solo viewing can also be incredibly effective. Sometimes being alone with the film heightens that sense of vulnerability and suspense. In summary, Whether you're catching Annabelle streaming from your couch, renting it digitally for a quick scare session, or lucky enough to see it projected on a big screen surrounded by other horror fans, there's an option for everyone. The important part is to set the scene so that the film's atmospheric storytelling and creepy visuals have room to breathe and make their mark. So grab your popcorn, dim those lights, and get ready to meet one of the most unsettling dolls in horror history. Annabelle awaits.